Every single morning, millions of Australians reach for their coffee. It is the ritual that starts our day, and the fuel that keeps us going. But what if I told you that some of the most popular coffee brands sitting in your pantry right now are hiding deeply troubling secrets? We are talking about forced labor allegations. We are talking about toxic chemicals in your decaf. We are talking about environmental disasters. And we are talking about companies that have been caught lying to consumers over and over again. Now, before you take another sip, I need you to hear this. These are not small family roasters. These are some of the biggest coffee corporations on the planet, and their products are sitting on supermarket shelves right here in Australia. Today, we are counting down 8 coffee brands that have serious issues you need to know about. From lawsuits and scandals to health concerns and ethical nightmares, this is the coffee content the industry does not want you to see. So grab a seat and let us dive into the dark side of your morning brew. Number 8. Maxwell House. This is a brand that has been around since 1892, and its slogan claims it is good to the last drop. But a federal judge in Florida approved a $16 million settlement against the company. Here is what happened. Consumers discovered that Maxwell House had been grossly exaggerating the number of cups you could actually make from their coffee canisters. The labels promised up to 210 cups, or even 380 cups depending on the size. But when consumers followed the brewing instructions on the back of the package, they found they were getting anywhere from 66% to just 74% of what was promised. Let me break that down for you. If you bought a canister that claimed to make 90 cups of coffee, you were actually only getting about 59 cups. That is 31 cups you paid for but never received. Multiply that by every single canister you have ever purchased, and you start to see just how much money consumers were lost. The lawsuit called it a classic and unlawful bait-and-switch scheme. And the worst part is that Maxwell House is owned by Kraft Heinz, which is one of the largest food companies in the world. They absolutely knew what they were doing. The same lawsuit also included Euban brand coffee, which operates under the same parent company. Both brands were caught making the same misleading claims. The $16 million settlement meant consumers could claim back some of their money. But let us be honest, that is a drop in the bucket compared to how much this company made from the deception. As part of the settlement, Kraft Heinz agreed to change its labeling practices and remove or revise the claims about how many servings their products can make. But the fact that they were doing this for years without any consequences, until consumers sued them, tells you everything you need to know about their priorities. At number 7, we have Folgers, and you might be noticing a pattern here. Folgers is one of the biggest selling ground coffees in the United States, generating an estimated $1 billion or more in sales each year. And guess what? They got caught doing the exact same thing as Maxwell House. Multiple class action lawsuits were filed against Folgers and its parent company J.M. Smucker, alleging that the company grossly misrepresented the number of servings in their coffee canisters. When consumers did the math, they found that Folgers products contained on average just 68% of the ground coffee needed to make the advertised number of cups. One lawsuit pointed to a 30.5-ounce canister of Folgers Classic Roast that claimed to make 240 cups. But the canister only contained enough coffee to make about 173 cups. That is 67 fewer cups from a single canister. The lawsuit states that by exaggerating the number of servings, Folgers engaged in a classic and unlawful bait-and-switch scheme that caused unsuspecting consumers to spend more money for less than the advertised amount of coffee they believed they were purchasing. This was not a small oversight or a one-time mistake. At least 42 varieties of Folgers products were found to contain substantially less coffee than required to make the advertised number of servings. This was a systematic course of unlawful conduct that affected millions of consumers for years. The lawsuits were consolidated into multi-district litigation, and the court ordered Folgers to produce hundreds of thousands of pages of documents. If that does not tell you there was something seriously wrong with their practices, I do not know what will. Number 6. Keurig K-Cups. Coming in at number 6, we have Keurig and their infamous K-Cup pods. Keurig has faced so many lawsuits and regulatory actions, it is hard to keep track of them all. But let me walk you through the highlights because this is a masterclass in corporate greenwashing. For years, Keurig told consumers that their K-Cup pods were 100% recyclable. They put recycling symbols on their packaging and ran marketing campaigns showing how easy it was to recycle their pods. There was just one massive problem. It was not true. In September 2024, the United States Securities and Exchange Commission charged Keurig with making inaccurate statements regarding the recyclability of its K-Cup pods. The SEC found that when Keurig told investors their testing validated that K-Cups could be effectively recycled, they conveniently left out a major caveat. Two of the country's largest recycling companies, which operate more than 1/3 of recycling facilities in the country, had expressed significant negative feedback about the pods' recyclability and said they did not intend to accept them for recycling. Keurig knew this and still told consumers their pods were recyclable. The SEC fined Keurig $1.5 million. But that was just the beginning. A class action lawsuit resulted in a $10 million settlement for consumers who purchased K-Cups labeled as recyclable. In Canada, Keurig was fined $3 million by the Competition Bureau and ordered to make an $800,000 charitable donation. Here is the environmental reality. Industry estimates suggest that out of approximately 35,000 single-use coffee pods produced every minute globally, around 29,000 of them end up in landfill. These pods can take anywhere from 150 to 500 years to decompose. And while they are sitting there, they release methane, which contributes to climate change. The pods are too small for most recycling facilities to process. They are contaminated with coffee residue and foil, and in many communities they are simply not accepted for recycling at all. Keurig knew all of this and still marketed their products as the environmentally friendly choice. At number 5, we have Nespresso, which is owned by Nestle. Now Nespresso likes to position itself as the premium, environmentally conscious choice for coffee lovers. George Clooney has been their brand ambassador for years. But the reality behind those sleek aluminium pods tells a very different story. Nespresso sells approximately 14 billion capsules every single year. In 2024, the company claimed it recycles about 35% of its pods. But independent experts suggest the real global recycling rate for coffee pods is closer to just 5%. That means billions of aluminium pods are ending up in landfills every year. Aluminium takes between 150 and 200 years to decompose in a landfill, but the environmental damage starts long before those pods end up in the ground. The process of mining bauxite ore to produce aluminium generates 10 to 12 tons of waste for every single ton of aluminium produced, including 3 tons of toxic red mud. Aluminium mining has been linked to human rights violations, deforestation, and pollution in the Brazilian Amazon, Papua New Guinea, India, and other regions. And Nespresso has not disclosed how many of its capsules are made from recycled aluminium versus virgin material that requires new mining. A 2021 peer-reviewed study found that coffee pods cause more carbon emissions than other coffee-making methods because of the greenhouse gases created from producing the packaging and from the subsequent waste. So much for that premium, eco-friendly image. When Nespresso earned B Corp certification in 2022, it caused an uproar in the ethical business community. 30 certified B Corp companies, including 11 involved in coffee production, signed an open letter criticizing the certification. They called Nespresso's business model extractive and fundamentally at odds with ethical standards. Nespresso has also been caught up in the same supply chain problems affecting other major coffee brands, which we will discuss shortly. The premium price does not equal premium ethics. Number 4. Moccona and instant coffee brands. This section is not about one specific scandal, but about something that affects all instant coffee. Instant coffee contains significantly higher levels of a chemical called acrylamide compared to fresh roasted coffee. A 2013 Polish study analyzed 42 coffee samples and found that instant coffee contained 358 micrograms of acrylamide per kilogram, compared to just 179 micrograms per kilogram in fresh roasted coffee. That is double the amount. Coffee substitutes were even worse at 818 micrograms per kilogram. What is acrylamide, and why should you care? Acrylamide is classified by the International Agency for Research on Cancer as a probable human carcinogen. It forms when foods are heated above 120 degrees Celsius through the Maillard reaction. The same chemical browning that gives your coffee its color also creates this potentially harmful compound. In animal studies, acrylamide has been shown to cause cancer and nerve damage at high doses. The European Union has set benchmark levels of 850 micrograms per kilogram for instant coffee and 400 micrograms per kilogram for roasted coffee. While most brands fall within these limits, the question is whether any level of a probable carcinogen should be acceptable. A 2022 Hong Kong Consumer Council test of 49 coffee products found acrylamide in 47 of them, with instant coffee samples having the highest levels. The acrylamide content ranged from 160 to 790 micrograms per kilogram in instant coffee, compared to just 53 to 240 micrograms per kilogram in other coffee types. The same testing found that 10 samples contained ochratoxin A, which is a mycotoxin that the International Agency for Research on Cancer classifies as a possible carcinogen. Some samples also contain trace amounts of lead and tin. To be fair, the dose makes the poison. Researchers at McGill University calculated you would need to drink about 10 cups of instant coffee per day to reach conservative safety limits for acrylamide. But if you are drinking instant coffee every day for decades, that cumulative exposure adds up. And when safer alternatives exist, why take the risk? As for Moccona specifically, Australian consumers have flooded review sites with complaints about quality changes after production moved to Thailand. Many report the taste has changed significantly and not for the better. Whether this is just perception or a real change in formulation remains unclear, but when you are paying premium prices for what many consider an inferior product, it is worth asking questions. At number 3, we have a category that might shock you: decaf, or decaffeinated coffee. Now, if you switched to decaf because you thought it was the healthier option, you need to hear this. Many decaf coffees, including some from major brands, are processed using a chemical called methylene chloride. This is the same chemical used in paint strippers, adhesives, and industrial degreasing. The Environmental Protection Agency in the United States recently banned most commercial uses of methylene chloride because it has been linked to cancer, neurotoxicity, liver damage, and even death. But here is the catch. That ban does not apply to food processing, so coffee companies can still use methylene chloride to strip caffeine from coffee beans. And many of them do, because it is the cheapest and most efficient method. The process works like this. Green coffee beans are steamed or soaked in hot water to open their pores. Then they are repeatedly rinsed with methylene chloride, which binds to the caffeine and extracts it. The beans are then supposed to be steam treated to remove solvent residues. The Food and Drug Administration limits methylene chloride residue in decaf coffee to 10 parts per million. Most brands fall below this level. But health advocacy groups argue that because methylene chloride is a known carcinogen, no amount should be considered safe for human consumption. In January 2026, a class action lawsuit was filed against Starbucks, alleging that their decaf house blend contained levels of volatile organic compounds, including methylene chloride, benzene, and toluene, that exceeded what the Environmental Protection Agency has determined as safe. The lawsuit claims this is avoidable chemical contamination introduced during processing. The real problem is that you have no way of knowing which decaffeination method was used on your coffee. There are no labeling requirements that force companies to disclose whether they used methylene chloride, or safer alternatives like the Swiss water process, or carbon dioxide extraction. The Clean Label project has been testing decaf coffee brands and found methylene chloride in products from several major manufacturers. They created a website called Check Your Decaf, where consumers can look up specific brands. If you drink decaf, I strongly encourage you to check whether your brand uses chemical-free processing methods. And think about who typically drinks decaf. Pregnant women trying to limit caffeine exposure, people with heart conditions or anxiety, and people with sensitivities who are already more vulnerable. These are the last people who should be unknowingly consuming trace amounts of industrial solvents. At number 2, we have Nestle, which owns Nescafe, Nespresso, and several other major coffee brands. Nestle is one of the largest food and beverage companies in the world, and their coffee products are everywhere in Australia. But the company has been plagued by controversy for decades. In April 2025, Coffee Watch and other advocacy groups filed reports under the German Supply Chain Act against Nestle, documenting serious human rights violations along the company's coffee supply chains. These reports detail child labour, forced labour, massive violations of labour protection standards, and wage exploitation on coffee farms in China, Mexico, Brazil, and Uganda. In June 2025, an investigation by Public Eye, in collaboration with Reporter Brazil, shed light on several cases of modern slavery perpetrated by Nestle coffee suppliers in Brazil. Workers were found in conditions that Brazilian authorities described as analogous to slavery. But this is not new for Nestle. The company has faced criticism for decades over its labour practices. ABC News documented child labour on coffee farms in China that supply Nestle and Starbucks. Children as young as 12 were found working during school breaks, often exposed to agrochemicals without proper protective equipment. In a 2022 Nightline documentary, investigators found children as young as 6 years old working on Rainforest Alliance certified coffee farms in Mexico. These farms were supposed to meet ethical sourcing standards, but the reality on the ground told a completely different story. Nestle has also been involved in water controversies around the world, extracting water from communities for bottling operations while locals struggle with access. And let us not forget the baby formula scandal that began in the 1970s and led to a worldwide boycott that continues to this day. In 2026, Nestle faced another controversy when infant formula products were found to contain cerealide contamination. While this was not related to their coffee products, it speaks to a pattern of quality control issues across the company. The company consistently claims to be committed to ethical sourcing, but report after report shows the gap between their marketing and reality. When you buy Nescafe or Nespresso, you are supporting a company with one of the most troubled ethical track records in the food industry. Number 1. Starbucks. At number 1, the brand that might surprise some of you is Starbucks. Yes, the company that charges you $6 or more for a cup of coffee, while marketing itself as committed to 100% ethical sourcing. The reality is far more disturbing than their green aprons and feel-good marketing would have you believe. In April 2025, international rights advocates filed a federal class action lawsuit against Starbucks on behalf of 8 Brazilian coffee workers. The lawsuit alleges that Starbucks sourced coffee from farms where workers were subjected to human trafficking and forced labor under what Brazilian authorities described as slave-like conditions. One of the plaintiffs, identified only as John, was just days away from turning 16 when he was allegedly recruited to work on a Brazilian coffee farm that supplies Starbucks. He worked under a scorching sun from 5:30 in the morning until 6 in the evening, with only a 20-minute lunch break. He was unpaid and provided no protective equipment such as boots or gloves. Brazilian authorities rescued him in a raid in June 2024 and concluded he had been subjected to child labor in hazardous conditions and trafficking. The lawsuit documents workers who were lured with false promises of fair pay, only to endure 16-hour workdays, hazardous conditions including pesticide exposure without protective gear, and debt bondage. Some workers had the cost of transportation, food, and equipment deducted from pay they never received. This was not happening on some random farm. These were farms connected to Keurig, which is Starbucks' largest Brazilian supplier and accounts for approximately 40% of the coffee Starbucks sources from Brazil. Keurig has received Starbucks' own CAFE practices certification, which the company uses to claim its coffee is ethically sourced. According to the Brazilian Labor Inspection Department, between 1996 and 2023, inspectors found 3,700 workers in slave-like conditions on coffee plantations throughout Brazil that directly supplied Starbucks and other major brands. That is with inspectors only visiting approximately 0.1% of coffee farms. In 2023, the coffee industry was the #1 source of governmental slave rescues in Brazil, making up 11.4% of all rescues from 2013 to 2023. This is a systemic, industry-wide problem, and Starbucks is right at the center of it. But it gets worse. In January 2024, the National Consumers League sued Starbucks for false advertising, claiming the company is misleading the public by marketing its 100% ethical sourcing commitment when it knowingly sources from suppliers with documented severe human rights and labor abuses. The lawsuit details violations at Brazilian farms, including workers rescued from modern slavery, illegal underage workers, 17-hour shifts, moldy and pest-infested employee housing, and citations for unsafe working conditions. At one Starbucks-certified farm in Guatemala, investigators found children under 13 working 40 to 50 hours per week. Then in January 2026, a former Starbucks vice president filed a lawsuit alleging she was fired after raising concerns about food safety issues. According to the lawsuit, during a demonstration of new equipment, maggots dropped from an overhead milk dispenser onto the counter and beverages. Baristas allegedly flicked the maggots away to avoid attendees seeing them. The lawsuit also claims a milk dispenser caught fire due to a manufacturing defect. Also in January 2026, Starbucks was hit with another class action alleging their decaf coffee contains toxic chemicals, including methylene chloride, benzene, and toluene, at levels exceeding EPA safety standards. The pattern is clear. Starbucks builds its brand on ethical sourcing and premium quality. But behind the marketing, there is a company that has been repeatedly caught sourcing from farms with labor abuses, facing lawsuits over product safety, and allegedly firing employees who raise concerns. Every time you pay premium prices for Starbucks coffee, you are potentially supporting a system that exploits workers, including children. That is why Starbucks takes our #1 spot. So there you have it. 8 coffee brands and categories that should give Australian consumers serious pause before their next purchase. From misleading labelling and environmental greenwashing to forced labour and toxic chemicals, the coffee industry has some serious problems that go far beyond whether your flat white has the right amount of foam. Now, I want to be clear about something. Coffee itself is not the enemy. Studies consistently show that coffee consumption is associated with health benefits, including reduced risk of certain cancers and a longer lifespan. The problem is the corporations that have turned this beloved beverage into a vehicle for exploitation and deception. So what can you do as a consumer? First, do your research. Look for coffee that is certified by organizations with genuine oversight, like fair trade. Second, consider buying from smaller local roasters who can trace their supply chains. Third, if you drink decaf, look for brands that use the Swiss water process or carbon dioxide extraction instead of chemical solvents. Fourth, consider switching from pods to other brewing methods that create less waste. And finally, vote with your wallet. Every time you choose not to buy from companies with problematic practices, you send a message. When enough consumers make that choice, companies will have to change or face the consequences. If you found this video valuable, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We are committed to bringing you the information that corporations do not want you to have. And remember, the truth is not always on the menu.